I'm Haley B. Miller, and this is Ohio Politics Explained, a podcast where you give us 15 minutes and we give you all the news you need to sound smart and impress your friends. Welcome back to Ohio Politics Explained. Today, we'll dig into a new plan to change the marijuana law, Trump's surprise pardon, why lawmakers want to limit immigrant property rights, and how a federal budget bill could affect Ohio Medicaid. With me today is Anthony Shoemaker.
Hey, Haley, how are you?
Good. We're back after a couple weeks off.
Yeah, holiday is over.
Before we get going, a small request. If you enjoy listening to OPE, please consider leaving us a review or rating on Apple Podcasts. So let's start with Medicaid. Congress passed a budget bill to enact Trump's agenda, which includes major changes to Medicaid. Most notably, it would impose work requirements on adults under 65, something Ohio Republicans have been pushing for a while. How many people could this affect?
Yeah, this could affect up to 500,000 Ohioans with these, could lose Medicaid coverage under this legislation. Medicaid also provides health coverage for over 1.3 million children in Ohio and pays for nearly 40% of all the births in Ohio.
Yeah, I mean, it's a major social safety net and one that Republicans said at various points that they would not touch, Trump, notably before this House vote, made some comments and was like, don't mess with Medicaid. But they see work requirements as a way of eliminating waste in the system. They think a lot of people are kind of taking advantage of these benefits by receiving them and not working. But there are, of course, a lot of people on Medicaid who can't work, who are already working, or, there are just a lot of different life circumstances.
Yeah. And, this would impact also gender affirming care, would ban Medicaid coverage for that, and paying Planned Parenthood and other clinics that provide abortion services. So it has some other impacts as well.
Yeah, it does a lot. And not only is there a potential effect on patients, but healthcare providers in Ohio are pretty worried about this, especially the people who are in rural areas. There are not a lot of resources in Ohio's rural communities, and the hospitals that are there rely pretty heavily on Medicaid patients because these are lower income folks that are using their services. And without that, it becomes harder to cover people and therefore harder for these hospitals to keep doing what they do.
Yeah. And, some of the people that have been talking the most about the dangers of some of this are the people running the hospitals in rural areas, just because disproportionately there are a lot of people in rural areas on Medicaid.
Now, the caveat to all this is that it's Congress and there's still a long ways to go. The House has passed this bill, but it's now before the Senate, and there's already a lot of disagreement about whether the House cut enough, if they need to cut more, if they need to roll back some of this. So there's going to be a lot more debate before it gets to Trump's desk, and I would be surprised if, there are no changes between now and then. It
doesn't sound like the Senate is overwhelmingly in favor of the House proposal.
Our second topic is also Trump-related. The president issued more pardons this week, including one for former Cincinnati City Councilman P.G. Sittenfeld. Sittenfeld, a Democrat, was convicted of federal bribery and attempted extortion. This kind of feels like it came out of nowhere.
Yeah, I mean, it was, it's interesting because it is a Democrat. P.G. Sittenfeld was kind of a golden boy for Democrats there for a while. He was running for mayor of Cincinnati years ago, way before, when he was a newcomer. He even challenged Ted Strickland for the U.S. Senate nomination back in 2010. So it's just kind of interesting to have Trump pardon a Democrat, but weirder things have happened, I guess.
And now I think the big question is, will Trump pardon former House Speaker Larry Householder? He was convicted in Ohio's biggest public corruption case. Householder is a Republican like Trump, and I think Householder spoke at the 2016 convention. There's perhaps more of a tie there than there is with Sittenfeld and Trump. So It sounds like householders, attorneys are exploring their options. We're not really sure yet what they're going to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think logically you would think if Trump is pardoning Democrats in Ohio, he would pardon a Republican in Ohio. Householder did speak at the Cleveland Convention in 2016. He's was a very loyal Trump supporter when he was in office. He is still facing state charges, so we have that to deal with. But it'll be interesting to see if he does get a pardon.
Let's pivot to marijuana. A House committee dropped new changes to a bill that would overhaul the recreational marijuana program backed by voters. The bill passed the Senate earlier this year, and the new version is basically a compromise between the two chambers. What are some of the big things that changed?
Well, it changes the way the tax revenue is allocated. It also changes that weird, I thought it was kind of weird, the jail time for people passengers in cars who are smoking in the car. They would have to do jail time. It takes that away. It also caps the number of dispensaries allowed in the state. Yeah,
the piece about the jail time for smoking or vaping in a car was really unpopular with groups like the ACLU, advocates for criminal justice reform. They argued that you shouldn't be creating more penalties for something that's newly legalized. So that's been taken out, but I think there's still a big problem for a lot of those folks, which is that this still removes the social equity program that was part of the initial law, and that was designed to kind of right the wrongs of marijuana prohibition and diversify the industry. And I think regardless of what the final bill looks like, that part of it is definitely going to be gone.
Yeah, and the other thing that a lot of people may notice is it makes some major changes to how it impacts THC and hemp products and where those can be sold, and pushes some of that into the dispensaries.
Yeah, that's another big change. As part of this, they're kind of combining the marijuana and hemp stuff into one bill. And so we'll see what happens. There's going to be at least one more committee hearing on this before it goes to the House for a full vote. And then I think there's still an open question a little bit as to whether there are going to be more changes, if the Senate will support it, or if they'll have to do what's called a conference committee, which is basically both chambers go into a room and figure out a compromise. Our final topic is a bill that could change life for immigrants in Ohio. House and Senate Republicans want to ban people from adversarial countries like China from owning property. They say this will boost national security and ensure bad actors can't live near key places like Wright-Patt Air Force Base. But this has gotten a lot of pushback.
Yeah, and Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, which is near Dayton and cities like Fairborn, have pretty large immigrant populations around the base. And then also in Dayton, you have Fuyao, which took over the old General Motors plant there, the auto glass factory, which is China-owned. Now, it sounds like that those kinds of places are going to be grandfathered in, but those kind of companies really save some of those old auto plants in the state.
Yeah, and I think there's even a question with this bill about whether just like an immigrant from China who's here legally could buy a house near one of, these pieces of infrastructure deemed critical, what it means for students who are maybe part of exchange programs or who want to move to the United States after school. So I think it just raises a lot of questions about, what that could look like for them and whether that leaves Ohio as a welcoming state for immigrants.
Yeah, and it could obviously play another role in attracting people to come to Ohio. I know Governor DeWine vetoed the first attempt to pass a similar ban on property ownership. As we try to bring in more people to the state, that's definitely going to be a sticking point. I think that this would require them to be citizens, so you would not be able to get, like those students and people who aren't citizens to own property.
And one more thing before you go. Tune in next week for a special episode on the 10-year anniversary of the Supreme Court decision that legalized gay marriage. My colleague spoke with Ohio's Jim Obergefell about that moment in history and the future of LGBTQ rights.